Time. Let's give folks, if people want to start saying where they're from. So Martin has a host of people. He's invited to help inform us tonight and help lead our webinar. And so let's see, Lana, would you say where you're from?
Yes, I'm from the Rotary Club of Binghamton.
Okay, Ed, how about you? We'll see if we can unmute
Unmute me. I'm from the Rotary Club of Glens Falls.
Yay, Lily knows you. And David K., where are you from?
I'm at the moment in City Hall in Ithaca, New York. I'm just celebrating my first year of membership in the Ithaca Rotary. And I'm also a member of Mediators Beyond Borders International, which Martin will be speaking about today.
Great. Okay. Why don't we do a few more before we turn this over to Martin? Mary, where are you? What club are you with?
So I'm President-elect Binghamton Rotary, and I've been a Rotarian for almost 20 years. My past affiliation was the Vestal Rotary Club. So I'm happy to be here tonight. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Welcome. Andy Cove. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm with the Ithaca Breakfast Club or Sunrise Rotary, what's left of it. I've been in Rotary since about the 1990s, I think, late 80s, 1990.
Great. So glad you could join us tonight, Andy. And Ken, where's your Rotary Club? Let's try you and unmute.
There we go. Glens Falls Rotary.
Glens Falls. Glens Falls gets the prize. Okay, Janelle.
I did not know this was introductory. I was just going to listen in. I'm with Syracuse Inner City. I'm on my way to get someone a meal that just had surgery. So I'm just going to listen tonight.
That's just fine. So glad you can do that. And safe driving. Pam Baxter, familiar face and name. Where is your club?
I'm with Albany Rotary.
Great. And right next to you in my Zoom boxes is Pamela Moses. Pamela, where are you from?
Yes, I'm from Cazenovia Rotary Club.
And you drive safely too.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining. Is that Simona?
Simona from Italy, Rotary Club Padova. Sorry, it's very late night, so my camera will be off.
You're in Italy logging on, Simona. That's great.
Yeah, hi Martin. Yeah, I'm just back actually a few days ago, and this jet lag is helping me to be awake now. So joining you and listening you.
Thank you so much. That's so sweet. So Simona's on. She's a Peace Fellow, Positive Peace Activator on Cadre as well. So she's a wonderful person in addition to all of those things.
We have a real treat in store tonight. And Katie, you're the last Rotary box I see on my screen. Where's your Rotary Club?
Hi, it's New York.
New York City?
Ithaca, New York.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I thought I knew your name. It doesn't sound okay. So let's I'm Nancy Potter, and I have the great pleasure of being part of the team of the Central New York Peace Subcommittee. And the other team members are Lily, you're from? I can lip read, Glens Falls.
Glens Falls. Yes.
And Elise is from?
Vernon, Verona, Cheryl community, VDS community.
Okay, and I just want you to know that Joe, the CNY News editor, thinks we're a fearsome threesome. So we are having a lot of fun, and we became acquainted with Martin from Mediators Beyond Borders because David, who introduced himself earlier, said, you know, you really need to be working with Mediators Beyond Borders International. And the wonderful thing about that is that Rotary International has a partnership with MBBI. And so we connected up with Martin, and this is the result of our conversations over the past few months to really begin diving into what kind of a peace initiative could serve our clubs and our communities and our world by having some conversations. So Martin has invited several of his colleagues. Martin, some of those are like Martin, Rotary Peace Fellows, Rotary Positive Peace Activators, and a number of other qualifications to be doing this webinar for us. So Martin, thank you so much for pulling all this together, and we look forward to learning and experiencing and seeing where we can go.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, and thanks for hosting me. And also for the desire for this district to really put into action peace building. So not just talking about it, not just measuring it, but asking the question of what can we do. And so I wanted to share this in the title here is Positive Peace in a Polarized World. And I know from my own feeling around this is watching everything going on in the world right now and just feeling like, how do I call myself a peace builder and feel totally sidelined by what's going on? And what can I do to feel like I am a peace builder and I am able to be effective? And so how do we design models for what we need is better connectivity with each other? And it strikes me as Rotary being one of those answers to what can we do. Part of it is by doing what Rotarians do best, which is connecting with one another. But sometimes it feels really difficult to do. And how do we reach out and be effective in our communities as well? So we're going to be addressing all of that today. So thank you. So thank you. And Uahi, which is the traditional greeting of the Chumash people, which is where I currently am in San Diego. And I mention that because I, in San Diego, happen to live on my great-grandmother's avocado farm. We have 4 generations of Californian, but as you can guess, that's not as far back as this region goes. And so recognizing those who came before me on the land, and though I'm a steward currently of several dozen avocado trees, there were people who were stewards here before, and recognizing that even in my work and the work I do, there are people who came before. And so whereas this feels like me presenting this, I'm really presenting it on behalf of everyone who's come before me. And so I would like to invite you all to think about who is it that came before you, and your passion for being on this call, your passion for asking the question of what can I do differently around peace, and just give you a second to reflect on that. And maybe in the chat, if you know the indigenous people of the region where you're from, maybe include that, and also include the name of someone that you feel inspired you the most for your passion for peace building and your curiosity for what you can be doing more. And so let's all just take a moment and maybe add that to the chat while we're here. See, is everyone able to add those names? So I'll keep going as we go through this and invite you all to continue to write those names in the chat. Is everyone able to participate in the chat? I don't see. Make sure. Stop sharing for a second. Let me see the. They are able to. Okay, great. Yeah, so if you would just keep adding those as we keep going along. I'll share a little bit about Mediators Beyond Borders International and the work we do as we get to work with communities all around the world. And it's kind of how we do this, which is most important. And the first tenet is that we only go where we're invited. And so we might get asked a question like, well, what are you doing in Yemen? And my answer is nothing. We haven't been invited to Yemen. We only work where we're invited because it's crucially important that we only do it so in collaboration with our partners. And collaboration is important because we want to be sensitive to the local context and the local culture and how things are done there, and so that we're not overtly impacting people by our presence. So we want to be support, we want to build resources, but we want to make sure that the people, local people, are coming up with their own solutions and are able to execute on those solutions. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. And what I find is in the past, we feel really good about being able to fly around the world with our capes and solve other people's problems, but it only makes us feel better because in the long term, what is sustainable is people being able to advocate for themselves and solve their own problems and coming up with the solutions for their own problems, which also goes into doing no harm. And being mindful of the role of trauma and how our different worldviews can impact other people's, and having that sensitivity. And part of that sensitivity comes from our teams being multidisciplinary, multinational, multicultural. So my background, for example, I actually come to this from architecture. I still keep my license in landscape architecture. And so I have a lens that's an architect lens. And so we work with, lawyers or therapists, and different people come to mediation with their different backgrounds, and then we all add different lenses as we do so. So today I'm going to share with you a really powerful kind of, concept on what we call this powerful energy in the world. And it's one of the most powerful energies there are. And it has the power to connect people across long distances, give you superhuman strength, like a miraculous memory. And these memories can sometimes last for generations. And when try like the creativity that can be created from this power is really, really mind-blowing. And you might think something like love, but the word is conflict. It's conflict that is this powerful. And one of the challenges with conflict is that we see this picture and we think this is peace. How serene it is. What I'm looking at, however, is massive amounts of conflict. In the distance, there's ice sheaving off rock. There's how many metric tons of water carving through a valley, roots pushing through the soil. In that water, there are animals acting like animals, killing each other without a second of regard for their feelings. But when we see it like this, it feels totally natural to us. This is nature. This is essential. But we become really uncomfortable when it looks like this. What if I told you these were the same thing? And that this was what was necessary for change to happen. And what I'm looking at is a picture of people whose basic human needs are not being met. And so this is the necessary conflict in order for them to meet those needs. Okay? So one of those challenges is how we see conflict. And so I'll ask you, and specifically ask, is it Mary? Mary, how do you say your last name? It's Surde?
Yes, Surdy.
Surdy.
Yeah.
Mary, how do you know you're in conflict?
Oh, I feel stress every day. I feel stress every day. So that lets me know I'm in conflict.
Okay. So if you feel stress around something,
Yeah.
yeah, and sort of an uneasy
Yeah.
feeling.
It could be cognitive, it could be physical, it could be emotional, but you
Yeah.
know,
Cause you stress.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Kim, how about for you? How do you know you're in conflict?
Uh, I think I'm one of those rare people that don't feel a lot of conflict. I kind of accept the world and people as they go by, and I like to think that I don't judge. So I keep my
Okay.
conflict, or if I have conflict, at a pretty low level.
So how do you recognize it in other people then? How do you know other people are in conflict?
Well, I see the news. I've actually made a concerted effort to watch a little less news lately
Sure.
and listen to a little more music. Yeah, I certainly, I see it. I have a 5-year-old granddaughter. I find it's interesting. Her world of conflict is much different than maybe yours and mine, but it's there and it's real for her, right? With her friendships and bonding of other people with
And
other
so for
people.
her, what are those markers how do you know she's experiencing conflict?
She's mean to her mom.
Okay. So
She's
angry
conflicted with
words.
something and can express it well. So
Okay.
she's learning.
Sure. Okay. So angry words, angry
Yeah.
behavior, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I think some of that is just finding at a 5-year-old level is just finding your space in the world that you live in.
Yeah. That's worlds of conflict. Yeah. Great. Katie, how about you?
Sorry, unmute.
No worries.
I had a feeling you were going to call on me. Well, I feel it in my body. I feel
Okay.
it in my body, and when my beliefs are contradicted by someone else's, I guess I can feel it mostly.
Yeah.
Energy.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's a somatic experience, and it could look like your heart racing, right? So it can be so different words we hear people describe this as there's anger, discomfort, division. So things we can watch, we can we hear it certainly in tone of people's voices, things like that. And so if these are the only ways in which we perceive conflict, no wonder you'd want to avoid it. These are like the worst house guests ever. But what we're called to do as peace builders is to ask the question of what's underneath it. What's underneath the expression of anger, for example? And Kim alluded to a little bit of it, which is underneath anger typically is fear. Fear of what? Fear of loss of a way things are, an expectation of how they should be, loss of identity perhaps. And why is that important? Is because we care. So the hardest thing to see when we're witnessing anger in others or in ourselves is that it's because we care. And so if you remember nothing else from our talk today, you can know that there's two things that are true for someone who's yelling. Is that they care about what they're talking about. And the second thing is they don't feel listened to. Now, not that any of you ever yell, but if you were to find yourself yelling or raising your voice, you also know these two things are true. I care and I don't feel listened to. Now, one of the people not listening to you when you're yelling is you, which is why it's so helpful to have somebody just reflect back to you what you're saying. Sounds like you really care about this. Sounds like you're really passionate about this. Now, notice I'm not agreeing with the person. I'm just reflecting back to me and what they're saying. And there's a way to say it and that's defensive and just escalates the situation. But there's ways that that person actually feels listened to and then they become more calm. Something I might say to an angry person is, you seem really angry. Would you like to be more angry? And what I'm doing is witnessing for them so they get to witness it in themselves. And as Kim was saying, one of the frustrations is my inability to express myself. And what happens when we don't feel listened to, we move to aggression. And then aggression moves into violence towards others. I might grab your arm, I might hit you, I want to get your attention. And unfortunately, what happens if we still don't feel listened to is we transition from violence towards others to violence towards ourselves. And we get to interrupt that process if we're able to listen sooner and listen for what's really going on for someone. So we can see these words, but as a peace builder, you're asked to look differently. So maybe what these words really mean, my heart's beating because I feel alive. I feel frustration because we have a relationship and it's important to me. And this space is really an opportunity, and this might mean progress. It might mean that the conflict our club is going through is the essential conflict we need to grow as a club. And so do we want to avoid that? Or do we want to be able to talk about it in an effective way so we're able to grow beyond it? But if we're scared to even address it, or we go, well, that's not professional behavior, that's not how we're supposed to act in a club, and we shut it down, what we're telling someone is, I'm choosing not to listen to you. But I'm also saying, as I'm not choosing to grow from this opportunity. Which is also to say is, I don't feel like I have the skills for this to be a productive conversation. And I get this a lot in Rotary when we say, we can't talk about that, it's political. What that's really code for is, I don't feel like I have the skills for this to be a productive conversation. What if you had the skills to talk about anything? Okay. And again, part of it is how we see it. And so we tend in our clubs, we create these rules and we isolate people because of the things they say or they do, and we judge them based off of that. And a lot of times when we have conflict, there's an iceberg and you see the tip of the iceberg, and that's how you describe it. Well, I work in lots of places where, and I just actually barely saw an iceberg last week, by the way. And I've never seen an iceberg before. I was in a cruise to Alaska and I was like, oh, that's what an iceberg does. So I like hippos because you see a hippo at the zoo. I've seen hippos in the wild, and you've got these cute little ears and eyes, but that is not the business end of a hippo. And so we react and we judge people based on the cute little ears and eyes, or not so cute little ears and eyes. And we ignore all the other things going on below the surface that are also going on for us as we're judging and othering other people. These things are always going on. And so what we're called to do is to look below the surface of what's really going on so that we can better understand each other. And so in this polarized world, we're stuck on the above the surface comments and behaviors. And part of the reason why that is because when we don't feel safe, it only feels safe to look at those things. It doesn't feel safe to go below the surface. Okay. So here's some hidden ones. When I'm working with teams and they tell me, we don't have any conflict. We actually mind our own business. We get along just fine. And I go, oh, okay, cool. So sometimes the absence of conflict is an indicator that there's conflict. It doesn't feel safe to rock the boat. I'm in an environment where I can't actually disagree or say that I don't agree with someone because that's not part of our culture. Now, everyone's heard some version of this one. That guy needs to go. If he went away, just left the club, we'd be fine. Yep, you would be. The sentence is seductive because it's true. You would be fine, but you wouldn't be is any better. And I don't need to see a show of hands because not everybody here has been a great fit for every team or every club or every situation you've been. But what if those other people could have learned from you and you could have learned from them before you left? So conflict transformation doesn't mean that everything's a good fit and we have to make everything work. Nope, that's not the reality of things. But transformation calls us to ask, what can we learn from this environment? What we can learn from this situation so all of us leave better for it. And finally, anyone have any questions? Great, let's keep moving. When our agenda is more important than the people on the agenda. When we get through our meeting so efficiently that we don't have space to hear what's going on for someone, that we don't create these spaces to go off the script and be able to really explore feelings and what's going on for people and prioritize the members of our club over the business of our club. Okay. So when I was so I did my fellowship in Thailand, and there was a gentleman, Mickey from Sarajevo, and he said, you know, this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and by and large, yeah, makes sense. And Rotary is really good at the lower ends of this, the food, shelter, clothing, really good at that part. But he said, you know, I've lived in communities that didn't have proper food, shelter, clothing, or security, and they would say that they were self-actualized and they had their own healthy sense of identity. However, if this community over there threatens to take away this community's identity, what will they do? They'll go to war. And when you do so, you give up food, shelter, clothing, security, and community, all for what? Your identity. And so when we look at what's at the core of conflicts, it tends to be these three things: identity, safety, and recognition. What identity is being threatened? What am I not being recognized for? How do I feel unsafe? So it's one of these three things. And I invite you right now to think about the conflicts in your life and which things do you think are at play there? And the really juicy ones are right in the middle, meaning my safety, identity, and recognition are being threatened. So how do we recognize these needs? So there's another gentleman who came along, Max Defneef, and he said, well, that's an oversimplification. Really, it's these 9, and there's different variations of the wording, but these are our 9 universal human needs. And the way universal human needs means, it means across all cultures, across all places, these are our human needs. Now, they get expressed differently in different cultures. And that's what I propose are our values. Our values are a culturally informed way of meeting our universal needs. But all of us have a need for this expression one way or another. How do we meet those needs? And more importantly, how do we become accountable or responsible for meeting each other's needs? So this is what my definition is of positive peace, is our ability to mutually meet each other's universal needs, which for those who are well versed in all this know is the opposite or discongruous with positive peace and negative peace. And maybe one of my peace activators or positive peace informed folk can tell me what's the difference, but give me an example, in a Rotary example, of the difference between negative peace and positive peace. Who can handle this one? What's it look like in Rotary to have negative peace versus positive peace? Anyone feel brave? Jennifer, do you want to try this one?
Sure, although the in Rotary part is throwing me a little. Are you talking about like within clubs and that kind
Sure,
of
within a club setting, district setting. What would it
Right.
mean for someone to have a club to have positive peace versus negative peace?
Sure. Like, I think we could start with negative peace, saying, usually when we think of negative peace, we think of, you know, the absence of violence, is always something that we talk about when we're talking about peace is not just the absence of violence. So I think in a Rotary setting, you could have somebody or people in your club who constantly have conflict and argue, et cetera. Versus a club or a project where people's attitudes and approach to solving the problem is more sustainable. It involves things that make people feel included. If there are conflicts, they're dealt with, in different ways. Am I hitting what you're getting at, Martin? I'm not sure.
Really good try, right? So the absence of violence in that case would be more like we have smooth running meetings every month, every week. We get together and we go through the agenda and everything's great. And so there's a absence of nobody fighting with each other. Nobody's calling each other names. They're not throwing food, or, everyone kind of just gets along. Versus positive peace might look like, hey, is this the best use of our time? Is what we're talking about right now really what this club wants to be focused on? How does this meet the vision for our club and why we signed up to be Rotarians? That's an uncomfortable question, but sometimes a necessary one that we avoid asking, and we keep showing up to our meeting even though our needs are not being met. And we're not meeting the needs of the community. So we're not meeting why we joined Rotary in the first place. And maybe we don't notice that Mike and Sally haven't spoken to each other for the last 3 months. But because they're not saying anything bad about each other, we ignore it. But what's the power of human potential if we were all able to work together? In a corporate setting, the example I use is if you had 12 computers in an office and one computer one day stopped talking to the other computers, you'd have IT on the phone immediately. And if they didn't solve the problem in an hour, you'd be irate. And if it didn't end by the end of the day, you'd be like pulling your hair out. We're losing so much money. But if two people in that office stop talking to each other, as long as they're not being nasty, we'll let it go for months. And this happens in our clubs all the time. People stop talking to each other, stop engaging, stop asking difficult questions. And so, yeah, it's fine, but it's not positive peace. It's not what it could be. We're not as productive as we could be, which means we're not as passionate as we could be. We're not as effective in our communities as we could be. We're not attracting new people who had their hair on fire for what they want to be doing. And some people just leave because this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Or they leave and all of a sudden say, well, I want to focus on my community, or I want to work on my work and my family. You didn't want to do that last 10 years, but we don't have a mechanism for that person saying, my needs aren't being met here. Okay? So this isn't how IEP sees it, but one of the ways I look at the 8 pillars of positive peace is what they're actually measuring is how well a community has their universal needs being met. And the words they use is a well-functioning government, equitable distribution of resources, free flow of information, good relationship with neighbors. What all of these things are creating metrics for is this community having their universal needs met? And we're able to measure those things. And so it's creating a metric, kind of a scientific way of looking at something that's hard to measure, which is, are my needs being met? And what they've said is that when these needs are met, when these conditions are being met, that's when you have positive peace within a community. And the good news is we can talk about these different things. We can engage in this. And so this is where I want to turn back over to Jennifer and tell us a little bit about the IEP, who IEP is, and also what this Peace Activator program is, because we're going to be working with, in the district as we continue to do this work, we're going to be pulling in Positive Peace Activators, Peace Fellows into this work so that we can create a really robust network for doing it. So Jennifer, would you please kind of tell us about IEP and the Positive Peace Activator program?
Sure. The Institute for Economics and Peace is a big Rotary partner. It is a global organization that has metrics for measuring this all across the world. They put out an annual report called, Martin, what's it called? It's called the Global
Peace Index.
Global Peace Index. And it's very interesting to dive deeper into that and look at how some countries that you may think are peaceful countries are not. It's been interesting to watch our country, of course, and in how it has met or not met some of these pillars of positive peace. When we were Peace Fellows, we worked very closely with IEP. We did a full week's training on the pillars of positive peace. We got to interact with the staff. They have global staff in different locations. And I think the partnership is a wonderful opportunity for Rotarians to really think about peace in a different way, as Martin was talking about in that example, and how some of our traditional concepts of peace are not necessarily the type of peace that we can put into action. The Peace Activators program is also a global program. Each region of the world has a group of peace activators. Martin and I are part of the North America and Caribbean Positive Peace Activator group. We have colleagues all around the world who are also doing this work. We have committees, we discuss issues, we talk about global grant projects, all the Rotary things within the lens of peace building. And we use these pillars of positive peace and the partnership with IEP very closely in the work we do. What have I left out?
No, I think that's great. Yeah, and just to know that there's a network of, I mean, I think it's 300 or 400
Yep.
positive peace activators around the world. And for a lot of the work we're going to be doing with these positive peace conversations, they're going to be online conversations. So we can pull in both facilitators that MBBI is trained around the world, Rotarians who have learned how to do this facilitation, but the vision is to also bring in these positive peace activators as facilitators, and so we can get diverse facilitators working on some of these, and as you continue to expand, we have a whole network to support you in this work. Anyone have any questions as long as we're here right now? Okay, and maybe someone can keep an eye on the chat for me. It's a little difficult to do all the things. So if there's a question in the chat.
There was a question, Martin, from somebody in the chat about what you were talking about before the example. And the question is a member resignation an example of negative peace?
Depends. We don't know. If someone leaves, and particularly if they leave unceremoniously or just kind of quietly, it's typically a form of avoidance that says rather than stir up the pot or go through a vulnerable moment, I'm just going to leave. It's not worth it for me to do that versus stay. And so what's really hard to see is when somebody is being that difficult personality, or we call them generous personalities, it's not because they don't care, it's because they do care. And it's actually the opposite is when someone leaves without telling us about it, that they just go, you know what, this just isn't worth it to me anymore. It's not worth it to stir the pot. I'd rather just go back to my life. And so, yeah, I would say that that's a version of negative peace. I'm going to choose to be peaceful in the sense of I don't want to rock the boat. So thank you for that question. It's great. Which brings us to our next slide, which is an invitation to breathe. Great. So, and a listening exercise. Yay! So this will be fun. So what we're going to do is I'll give you the instruction first, and then we're going to do a little mini breakout room. And what you're going to do when you get in that breakout room is you're going to decide on a speaker and a listener. And what you're not going to do is be like, oh my gosh, Jack, it's been so long. How you doing? How are the kids? Which is like, we love to do that, but we're going to put that aside, and we're just going to choose a speaker and a listener. And that speaker is going to describe the last time you felt inspired. And this is important because you only have a minute to do it. And then after that minute, we're going to announce that there's a little thing where I can send you a message and say, it's been a minute, and you can switch. And that listener now is going to repeat back exactly what was said in the order it was said in. Now, you're not taking notes. You just got to listen. And what you're not going to do is you're not going to fix or relate or like, oh my God, that's so awesome, that's so inspiring. You're just going to respond back with exactly what the person said in the order they said it. And then we're going to switch, and that listener becomes a speaker. So we've got about 4 minutes all together, and I'm going to create the breakout rooms now. I'm going to stop sharing momentarily to make that a little bit simpler for me. And I'm going to just guess at how many rooms we're going to need, and then we'll have enough people to put in those rooms. Some of you may be in a room with someone who's not connected, which is a little bit of a challenge, but if you do, that happens, just come back to the main room. We'll find you. We'll pair you up with somebody else. And I think, okay, create the rooms. Doesn't matter. I'm going to close them for you. And after 10 seconds, all right, I think we're all good. I'm going to open these rooms and hope for the best. And I'm going to put the Jennifer, I'm going to put you with Mary in room 10. There we go. Great. All right. Oh, Katie, you're back. I think you're supposed to be with Tegan. Oh, there you go. All right. Looks like everyone's where they're supposed to be. Oh, except Franz is not joined. Franz, are you with us? Nancy, am I frozen or can you? Are you on mute?
I can hear you, see you, and you're moving. And I did send Franz a direct message, say welcome, and this is recorded, so you can catch up on it later. But Franz, if you're there, let me ask you to unmute.
He might not have great connectivity.
Okay.
He hasn't joined the room yet.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Excellent groundwork.
To know more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I felt like my partner was a really good listener and responded more specifically exactly what I said. I hear you saying.
Mm-hmm. How do you think you did?
So.
Who is your partner?
I can't remember his name. Where are you?
David.
Oh, David K. All right.
Thank you, David.
So, David, I'll put you on.
Totally fair.
You're on the hot seat. How did Lorna do?
She actually did very well. She really, I would say she went for the gist of what I was saying rather than trying to repeat everything in order. But she really, I felt she really heard the basics. And I think that she described a little accurately that she, in a sense, her curiosity was taking her into some interpretation of what, trying to figure out what was going on. Whereas I have had many, many years of training with MBBI and others, and that initial encounter was less likely to sort of try and interpret, and I was really trying hard to just say what I heard from her.
Yeah. So a couple things you're reflecting back, if I can hear you, which is having done this exercise or something similar, created a calm, whereas Lorna might not have been as calm, trying to remember all the things or worried about doing it right. And so in the not necessarily worrying about doing it right, a little bit easier for you in some ways. But in the net result is you felt listened to and felt like she did a pretty good job. Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Who else? Who else would like to share? Ed, how about you? How was it for you?
It was tougher than I thought. So I was with Lena, and it wasn't because anything she was saying was difficult or complicated, but I think maybe overthinking because you're trying to remember it all in the same order.
Okay. How do you think you did?
80%. I think I got the gist of it.
Lana, how would you think? How would you rate him? How did he do?
I would say a good 92%.
Okay, 92, maybe 92 and a half, you know?
Take that, A-.
Yeah. Well, here's the important question, Lana. Did you feel listened to?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Could you have been thinking about anything else and being successful with this little project we just did? So if you were distracted and thinking about anything else, would you be successful at doing this exercise?
Asking me, Martin?
Yeah.
No, if I was thinking of something else, which often happens, I would not be successful.
Yeah. And right now it feels pretty good. You can feel the kind of the energy even in the room, even though we're online, is we feel more connected to each other. Now, another question for you. Did you have to agree with Ed in order to listen to him?
At this point, he used a term that I didn't understand. And so I went back and asked him what it meant. So it was very clear what he was trying to say.
But did you have to agree with him? Was agreement necessary to listen to him?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I probably did agree with him. Yeah, I did agree with him.
Right. But even if you didn't agree, would you been able to listen to his story about how he was inspired?
Absolutely.
Okay. So it's possible. Even though most of us find ourselves at some point in our life saying, I can't listen to this person. I don't agree with a word they say. And what we know.
Martin?
Yes.
May I just say something about that? There are often so many disagreements within our community these days. My wish is that the people who disagree with me, I honestly wish I could get them in a room and ask them why they believe what they believe in. I've not been able to do that for one reason or another, but I understand what you're saying. It's so terribly important to understand the other point of view, even if you don't, even if you disagree. And I personally believe that I've never had that opportunity to do that.
Yeah. And I would say even before, thank you for that, even before understanding is listening. And so one of the challenges is we don't feel listened to. And so one of the services we provide is the ability to listen to each other. The other piece of this is how long did that exercise take? About 4, maybe 5 minutes. But how often do we find ourselves using this word? Busy. To describe why we can or can't do something, who we can and can't talk to. Sorry, I'm really busy today. And in Japanese or in Chinese characters, what you're actually saying is I'm absent to what's going on in my life. And instead, if we know that within 5 minutes we can feel disconnected to another human, what would it be like to say, hey, I've got 10 minutes now, or at 4:30, I've got 30 minutes. But also know from this exercise that if I don't actually have 10 minutes or 25 minutes, telling someone that you do because you're being polite isn't actually being polite because you don't have the ability to listen to them. And one of the ways you know someone doesn't feel listened to is because they'll repeat themselves. You'll be like, oh, I heard you. No, they didn't. They wouldn't repeat themselves if they felt listened to. And so being present for people, being present for ourselves is really important aspect of this. So I was sharing with those that weren't in the group of one of the things was adding stress to this by giving you what was a very difficult task. The idea of repeating something exactly kicked in a different part of your brain, which caused some people to hyper focus and some people to lose focus, but all required you to engage with each other in a different way than you're used to engaging. So here are a few tips for how we ask ourselves how to listen deeper. So one of the things that's a relearning is not listening to relate to the other person. So we're taught, excuse me, that we're meant to relate to the person we're speaking because that builds trust or builds camaraderie. But what it becomes dangerous when we're doing deep listening is an example I use is someone could say, I'm really distraught. I just lost my dog. And a very perfectly normal thing to say is, I know how you feel. I just lost my dog last week and it was terrible. Or last year and I'm still not over it. But the truth is, you have no idea what it's like to be them losing their dog. But the fact that you think you do means you're no longer listening to them. You're now hearing your story spoken by another person. And so if you've ever felt heavy after a day of listening to a close friend, it's likely what you were doing was relating their story to all of your stories. And so while it is like kind of like a candy connection, like it feels good to have that connection, it feels good to have someone that has a shared idea, part of what happens is we build up all these stories and they stick with us. And so knowing when I'm listening to somebody that this is their unique experience, something that's happening to them, not happening to me. And it becomes more serious when we're talking about even heavier conversations. Imagine if in my day with the people I work with, I was adding their story to mine. It would be dangerous for me and it would be dangerous for them. Letting go of winning and losing. A friend of mine, there was a rally on TV about the KKK and there's white supremacists, and they said, well, how do we win over minds so full of hate? And my answer was, you let go of winning. Because if you're trying to win, you're probably not listening. And so, in a lot of words, it's commendable to want to understand someone. The first step is, can I listen? Can I listen empathically to what you're saying? Can I create a space where you get to listen to yourself, right? Reason why people get angry, why they raise their voice, part of it, they don't feel listened to by themselves. But by giving a space of listening, people are able to hear how they actually feel about something. We know listening for what you don't know instead of confirmation bias, separating the person from the problem. For me, that looks like sometimes someone will have a swastika tattooed on their neck. And I think I won't even commit to a bumper sticker on my car, let alone a tattoo like that on my body. This is how loudly someone had to speak to feel listened to. I know nothing about that person. And this last one is really important from a Rotary standpoint. We are people of service. We also think we're people of solutions. And that's dangerous in listening, especially in my job when people come to me for advice. Martin, help me with this. And I have to think to myself, I don't correct them, by the way. I said, no, I'm not going to help you, or I'm not going to give you a solution. I'm not going to give you advice. In my brain, though, I say, nope. What I'm going to do is ask you really good questions. Because whose solution is better? Mine or theirs? And we all have that friend who's been in a terrible relationship and they're like, what should we do? And you're like, well, you should definitely quit. Or you should definitely leave that person. And they're like, yep, I'm going to do it. And maybe they do. But the next week or the next month, they're right back with them, or they're right still back in that job. And then they come back and they're all distraught. And they're like, what should I do? And you're like, I told you what to do. And I don't want to hear it anymore. Because I offered my solution. And I'm partial to my solutions. Versus asking the question of what feels right to you. Now, whatever they decide, I no longer have a dog in that fight. I'm not partial to it. So I can ask them that question again when they come to me again. Whatever serves them, whatever solution works for them is the best one for them. And this last one is really important. So this one came out of the work doing with John Anderson, who's on the call, working with the Niska Nation. And one of the things we would do is work first with the elder before doing any sort of training or coaching in community. And what that elder said to me, said, Martin, what you're describing is not a good suggestion. For us, it's a law. I was like, what's the law? And I'll read it to you. And it says, Dim hochwillen kem gulung silgaden, which means be mindful to listen with a compassionate heart. And the second part is be careful not to hurt the heart of others. Sounds great, but why is it a law? Well, I started thinking about it, and I started thinking about the brain science of this. Okay. And what the brain science says is when we feel defensive, our brain shuts down. Our prefrontal cortex shuts down in that flight, fight, or fright mode. And what happens in that space is we can remember all the threats in our environment. What we can't remember is any of the positive things or things we did or said, right? So if you ask two people who've been fighting with each other, they'll tell you verbatim what the other person said. But if you ask them how they contributed to it, they'll, well, no, I didn't. That was them. And they're not lying to you. That's all they remember. Because that was all that was relevant, is the threats. Now, it turns out that's not just really good advice for indigenous cultures, right? Because in indigenous culture, if they only remember the negative things and you're a narrative culture that doesn't write anything down, then what happens? Your society goes away. You no longer have a fabric of connected tissue that keeps you connected. But here in our context, in the US, if someone happens to be of a different political persuasion, they could have dedicated 30 years of their life to public service. But if they don't agree with me ideologically, I can't tell you one gosh darn good thing they did. Because we're constantly in a state of threat. We're not remembering the positive stories about each other. And what's happening is the disintegration of the connective tissue between us. And so what this requires of us, what it's asked of us, excuse me, is how do we open that brain back up? How do we reconnect the different connective tissues that bind us together? How do we re-listen to each other with an open brain so that we can be curious about one another? What does it take? And one of the things it takes is compassion for understanding what our collective experience is. Now, I don't know how many of you guys read the papers, but did you read about this global pandemic thing? It was really serious, right? Affected a lot of people, followed by this financial crisis, followed by some wars, polarization, climate change, disinformation, all of this stress that it was just one after another that we almost universally experienced around the globe for the first time in recorded history. Did the entire planet have a shared experience? And what that creates for us is called, technical term is allostatic load, where the stress hormones in your system build up and are not able to be flushed out. And so when you have this polycrisis world where we're constantly bombarded on it, whether or not you've experienced big T trauma or little t trauma is inconsequential. We are all experiencing a state of trauma for our brains. And so what happens in those states of trauma? It affects our perception and how we see the world. So you've all done these little kind of clever tricks, and I ask you the question of like, which circle is larger? And you can probably imagine, because I'm asking you, that they're actually the same size, right? One just looks bigger based on its environment. I can ask another question of like, which direction is this gentleman facing? To which doesn't seem to be a right answer. It's a matter of, how do I look at it? Which way is he going? So what is our relationship with perceptions versus reality and facts? What happens when it's black and white? And something's clearly black and clearly white, and there's right and there's wrong. Right? There's discernible right and wrong. Is it? Or is it just based on our perception? Those two faces are the same color. But a second ago, based on my perception, they were different. So what is a fact? And what is a perception? How many sticks are there? Is it 3? Is it 4? Is it a 6? Is it a 9? How about math? Now, I'd ask the people who've done this exercise with me not to answer the question, but who here knows the square root of 25? Ed, you know the square root of 25? Pam's got 5 on it.
Yes, 5.
It's 5, okay. Anyone else? This is math, so there's a clearly right answer to this.
Just feel like I'm being tricked. So
You have that feeling like I'm being led into something here, right?
I'll play along.
Okay, 5. So I got 2 5s so far. Well, I'll tell you, I'll just skip to the punchline here. If you were in the 5th grade and you answered 5 on a test, you'd be marked wrong. Because the true answer is 5, comma, -5. Because -5 times -5 is also 25. So 5 is both a right answer and the wrong answer simultaneously. It is a truth and a lie. And what happened to your brain is when you arrived at a right answer, it stopped thinking. Your brain does not want to believe that in the universe, there's an equally right answer that is the opposite of the one I just gave. -5 is the opposite of 5. They are both equally correct and equally incorrect. And only with their exact opposite does it become true. Now, how does this apply to us? Well, I'm a good person. And I work in domestic violence and I support women all around the world. And I'm someone who has hurt women. If for no other reason than I don't get to determine if someone else is hurt by my words and my actions. So I am a good person and a bad person. But if in my reality I only see one, I can't hear the other. And so in our polarized world where you get to be one thing or the other, we label people and we keep them stuck in those spaces. And so the opposite of polarization is being able to hold multiple truths. Now we are infinitely more complex than the square root of 25. And so how do we be able to see both ourselves through compassion, that we are both things or all things at the same time, as well as someone else? Yes, they are this person, and there's this person. Is no part of them worthy of trust? And then we start hearing the words we use to describe each other. That person's a liar. What I hear when I hear that is I don't have the capacity to listen to this person. So I'm going to dehumanize them, pretend that they're not worthy of being listened to because I don't have the capacity to hear them. So my mentor says is you cannot lie to me. You can only tell me the story you want me to hear or the story you want you to hear. And my ability to be able to listen to them, even when I don't agree, is essential for peace building, because otherwise we can't make progress. And so the images I've just been sharing with you, they're all kind of black and white images. What happens when they're no longer black or white images? What happens when the subject's important to us? when the symbols are meaningful to us, when it touches our core beliefs and our core values? What happens to our brains then? So this polycrisis world where our brains in states of threat, and on top of it, our identities and our core beliefs are in threat. It doesn't become surprising why we drop down to these oversimplifications and these binary thinkings. It's what's happening to our brains. And so whether it's right or wrong, it's our ability to say, hey, this might be going on for this other person, or have the compassion to say, this is what's going on for me. There's a good chance it's going on for them too. And so how do I slow this down so I can go back from a brain that looks like this to a brain that looks like this? And what kind of community and society do we want to work and live in? So this is how we come to this next part, which is our positive peace conversations. And so one of my theories of change is that how we overcome this is by being connected to one another. And so these positive peace conversations are a mechanism for us to hear each other and ourselves, which is really close to the Rotary vision, right? A world in which we're able to connect to ourselves and to each other, our communities. And so this program that your district is about to embark on is how do we grapple with these issues? How do we learn techniques, facilitation techniques, create spaces where we can hear at least from each other? How are we going to tackle the most difficult situations that our communities face if we as Rotarians can't talk about it amongst ourselves? If we can't even, people who we are with every week, if we can't hear from each other, how are we going to be able to hear from our community? And so this practice is first an internal one and one that we're able to go out into the community. And so I asked John Anderson to join us today. And John's newly back from traveling the world, so he's all rest and relaxed and looking good. And so, John, would you'd share some reflections on what the district's done, what's the impact been for you personally, what other applications you've seen for this, and just share with us maybe 5 minutes and just kind of share with us what the experience has been like for you.
Thanks, Martin. I'm from British Columbia in Canada, and we had the opportunity of working with Martin and MBBI a few years back when we were doing a district conference. It was during COVID time. And we didn't know it was going to be COVID time when we started doing this, but it became COVID time and we had to change our direction many times doing this. But what we got to do was we were very much into reconciliation. And the area we were going to be having the conference in had a lot of First Nations or Indigenous peoples in the area. And Martin made reference to the Nisga'a Nation. And so we were a group of Rotarians talking about reconciliation, and we knew nothing about it, quite frankly. We didn't even know Indigenous people. We had not talked to them. We had not done any of this kind of thing. So Martin, of course, being Martin, got us involved and said, okay, let's find some people. Let's get these people going. So we actually started working with the Nisga'a Nation, and we did our training in positive peace together. And that was a great learning experience. But where that came from was it went from that experience, and really what they taught us was you can't have reconciliation until you have education, until you have knowledge, until we know each other. And the way they saw the world, the way we saw the world, wasn't always the same thing. But from there, we went on to what are we going to do in our own district and what are we going to do in our club? And we then did a training session with MBBI, training facilitators, and then went back to the clubs after the conference, which was a great success, I might add. But after that time, we went back to the clubs and we said, okay, we have trained up to 50 facilitators in our district. These are people who have gone through courses, started like today, and went on for several sessions where we actually learned how to listen to each other better, how to help people talk, and made people feel comfortable coming together as a club, because many times it was people were not listening to each other. And when Martin started, he said, he used the terms invited, in collaboration, inclusive, and doing no harm. So we really needed to invite the clubs to try this concept of a what we called then a facilitated peace conversation, what we're now calling a positive peace conversation. We invited the clubs to let us work with them. We let them choose the topic. We didn't go in there and say we should have a conversation about such and such. They had to tell us what they wanted to talk about. And sometimes it was, what does Rotary mean? What are we going to do after COVID? Because we're all on Zoom now, we're going to meet together, or we're not going to meet together. Some people don't want to meet together, and all of that kind of thing. So they had their own issues that they needed to deal with. Or in some cases, that was, we have disputes within our club. How do we solve them? And once a club had got involved, said, yes, we'd like you to come in and help us with one of these conversations, we got the facilitators that have been trained. They came, most of it was done on Zoom to start with, because we were still getting over COVID when we started this. So a lot of our conversations have been done on Zoom, and this works very well on Zoom, actually. The club members come together, they have the topic. Out of that topic, we give them questions. We break down the questions. They all have that before they come to the meeting. There's not a great surprise for them. We give them some agreements that Martin will talk about later, that really people, how are we going to operate? How are we going to perform during this? And so what we wanted to do with the clubs was really get people talking to each other. The facilitator is not there to solve the problem. The facilitator is there to have people set the environment so that people can talk to each other. And we found it very successful. We've done about, I'd say, 70 different conversations in our district. Once it got going, people started to ask us to come in. Now that's not on, this is, I've said over several years. We're now at a point that they're not asking, because they feel, oh yeah, we've done that. We've had our conversation and we've done it again. But they really need to have many, because the aim of this is to make that club a hub of peace and within themselves. It's not a matter of just the club being able to have the conversation, but getting good at doing the facilitations themselves and then taking it out to their community. And we've had some examples of doing that in our district, where we've been asked by local libraries to come out, because the library board was having some disputes and difficulties. And it was a great experience going out. We've done with stratas and housing stratas, where the people just didn't talk to each other. That was a very interesting thing. And sometimes these people live next door to each other, never really had a conversation and really never listened to each other. So the club actually, where it really becomes successful is when the community comes to the Rotary Club and says, can you help us? We've got an issue. So that's where you're aiming at. But you got to start at home, and you got to start with your own clubs and where you go. So in our district, we found it really quite successful, but it doesn't just happen. You've got to keep working at it. And we've trained now, I think, about 75 facilitators, probably got about 50 that are still working at it. They keep coming to me and saying, when are we going to do another one? Well, again, you can't force this. You've got to be invited. So you can't just force these things in there. But we are getting, having more and more of these conversations, thanks. And Martin stayed with us throughout this whole journey, which has been wonderful, and you need that peace committee to lead this all the way through. You can't just expect the clubs to do it by themselves. So is that what you wanted me to say, Martin? I've said it. So that's what happened.
That's great. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, thank you, John. That's exactly what I was looking for. And this idea of the theme of Rotary being a hub, and what if, as someone enters a community and they see the Rotary sign, what that starts to mean to people is this is a connected community. I know that this community has the skills to address whatever conflict comes their way. And what if our local mayors knew to reach out to our club presidents to say, whoops, we have an issue. Would love to be able to talk about this. Will you set something up? And because we represent a lot of the community leaders, the business leaders in that community, we can pull the right people together to have the kind of conversation that community needs. And so you can be a part of the solution. And my vision is that what if 41,000 clubs, 44,000 if you include Rotaractors, all had this capability worldwide? What impact could we make? And so that starts with our ability to hold these conversations, to train facilitators, have facilitators have the ability to practice, to get better at this work, and so that we can be seen as that resource as Rotarians within these communities. And so really looking for all of us to be a part of that. We're going to do a training in September, and we're gonna circulate for certainly the people on this call, but we'll have about 25 or 30 spots only for our first cohort to train as facilitators. We're going to select maybe a half dozen to a dozen clubs to hold these conversations. And the positive peace aspect of it means we're going to ask each of the clubs to complete the 8 pillars of positive peace. So that means each club over a 2 or 3 year period holds these 8 conversations. It completes all the different 8 pillars of positive peace. And so that's our goal for this district, is that we have the clubs engage in that way, and that's what's going to make us peace builder clubs and a peace builder district that is doing something more than just talking about peace. So with that, we have 8 minutes for whatever questions you all have. Thank you so much for hanging out, and yeah, whatever questions myself, Jennifer, John can answer, please fire away.
I was wondering if John could share a little bit about sort of the initial start and what were some sparks that really helped to ignite the passion, the fire for the clubs to do this. You talked about the relationship with First Nations. Were there other things that were important?
Sometimes with a club, with my own club, for instance, we used DEI at one stage, and we had speakers come and talk about different aspects of DEI over a series of meetings. And some of these were uncomfortable conversations in our club. Some club members said, well, we don't want to talk about this. What's going on? Why are we talking about all these things? But we said, well, just listen. And then we went into a conversation based on the fact that we'd had these. There were 3 sessions, actually. We had 3 speakers, everybody had heard it. And then we had a conversation about how we were feeling, how we were going to deal with this in our club and how we wanted to deal with it. Immediately, it was good because people had a base to work from in that case. That was just an example that I think worked well for us. Others, the club president would phone and say, we have this issue, we've got a foundation committee that we don't like we've got our own charitable society, and yet we feel people should be giving to the Rotary Foundation, not to the charitable society. We have a conflict in our club about this, and people are really part of that, and they believe in it very, very carefully. So we said, okay, let's talk about it. And really, there were the people in the club that do all the talking, and some people had never talked, but in this process, everybody gets to talk. Even the newest member gets to talk. Even if they don't know a lot about it, they still have a feeling about it, and they get to talk. And actually, it was people came back to us and said this was really helpful because we actually listened to each other.
Thank you.
One of the stories John, I remember sharing with me was the timing of was it Flag Day and the discovery of the unmarked graves at the residential schools. So at the same time that there was this kind of gruesome discovery, it timed out with Flag Day and the local Rotary having a fundraiser of selling flags, Canadian flags. And so some of our most difficult conversations are not between a right and a wrong, but between 2 rights. And there is nobody wrong. But how do we hear each other? And how do we divorce ourselves from the need to have a solution versus a need to build deeper understanding and create spaces where we can listen? Now, a problem like that previously would have felt unattainable for a Rotarian to deal with. But having gone through this experience, now you go, it's difficult, but we can talk about it. Imagine having that feeling that anything could be faced in your community and go, wow, that's difficult. And I trust we can talk about it.
Martin, you talked a little bit about the, and John too, about the training. What what kind of help does that give us maybe for our professions, or for other roles we have?
Great. Yeah, good question. So what's really important about that is we're people of service. So on the outset, what you're doing is you're taking this facilitation training so I can be a facilitator and I can help clubs have these difficult conversations. And that's what motivates Rotarians. We love being people of service. But when I ask people after the training, what did you get out of it? How have you applied this? The answer is their families. I hadn't spoken to my sister in 20 years. And we spoke. I heard, sometimes it's a relative, it's a parent who's passed. I finally understand what my dad was saying. I wish I would have understood sooner. And it's your own personal lives and your colleagues who we end up working with and working through. So we join this because we want to be in service. We want to be these facilitators who can help other people hear each other. And what happens is I increase my own ability to hear the people who are most important in my life. Thank you for the question.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Mm.
And one something I want to add to that question of what was the piece that drew people together? It was our leader, and Dave Hamilton, who's now passed. He made it the theme of his district conference to have these conversations. So we held a 250 person peace conversation during the conference, and that was the impetus for doing the training, doing the practice. And so it wasn't that it was meant to be a touch point, but we had to practice before, and then we were able to keep that momentum going afterwards. And sometimes that's what it takes, is that first mover to say, this is what's important to us, and this is what we're going to be doing, that gets the momentum going. And so maybe even thinking about something we could do for next year's district conference is we're going to hold one of these with different parts of our community. We're going to invite them to district conferences, what we're going to do. So having a touch point where we lead up to an event really helps to get people excited about it. Pam?
I just want to say I am a district DEI chair for CNY Rotary, and this just resonates with me because I feel even in Rotary there, we're starting to try to teach people what DEI is, but so much of that felt very performative for me. And my whole thing is we need to sit down and have a conversation because we need to connect as human beings. And when you connect as human beings, even though you may be on opposite ends of the spectrum of your beliefs and your core values, there is an energy between two people or a group of people, and that is what is going to solve conflict. And that's what's going to eliminate or decrease the hate in the world. So, and I made a comment earlier. I am someone who does not believe conflict is bad, because if we didn't have conflict, we would never have change in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So conflict is not always a bad thing. But I'm thrilled about this. I'm very excited about this. To see that our district is interested in getting involved in this. This is very exhilarating for me. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Pam, one of the things we don't talk about is the A that we add when we add diversity, which is adversity. And we like to tout how we should have diversity, and we overlook that what diversity does, and the benefit of it, as you spoke to, is it creates conflict, it creates adversity, it creates different ways of thinking. And so when we're performative and we just add people to the mix without increasing our skill level to deal with adversity, it's problematic. And it's been backfiring, because that's what happens when you increase adversity without increasing our skill set. So what we're asked to do, if we really believe in this, is to increase our skill set, to be more skillful in these conversations, because we are adding adversity necessarily, because if we're a district that wants to grow, these are the kind of things we need to grow. We need adversity to grow. We need to be uncomfortable in order to grow. But we also need the skills to go alongside of that. So thank you for that.
This is so valuable. We could go on and on. I do see that it is 8:30, and I want to respect people's time this evening. And I want, Elise, Lily, and I will be putting out an email to all the participants and those who signed up and knew they wouldn't be able to participate, but they want the recording. So we will be putting that out to everybody who we have on the list, and we'd like to include you on the list to invite to some get acquainted Zoom sessions that we're planning on the 20th and 21st for what the CNYP subcommittee is doing. We're a subcommittee of the foundation committee. So we have a distinct purpose, and we're going to be, we want your input. We would need input from the district members to make this a reality. So I think we all believe in the magic of Rotary. So let's make it work, and let's have some fun in exploring the adversity among us.
Yep, wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you, Martin, and colleagues for coming and being part of this evening. Appreciate your participation.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you all.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you. And Pam, you're on my list. Thank you. Thank you, Katie, for being here. Elise.
Right. Good night, everyone. Good job.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, there it is. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
So yeah, we need to follow up with you, Martin.
Yeah. Yeah, this is fun.